Mrs. Winston, third grade class presents.
Hello and welcome to New York City Atheists, live on tape, brought to you by New York City Atheists Incorporated. I'm your host, Dennis Horvitz, the David Letterman of the Hopelessly Damned. Sex and drugs and rock and roll. That's a subject that some people look upon with trepidation, and others of us look upon with fond memories. We're going to deal with only one of those three topics today. We'll never know. And hopefully we'll get to the other two in other shows, but we probably have to show them later in the evening, if you know what I mean. Our guest today is Bob Costa, who was a New York City Atheist discovery. He has been attending our meetings, and we subsequently had him as a guest panelist on one of our sister shows, This Week in Atheism. Happened to be one of my favorite group of shows. It was basically a free-for-all, essentially. In any case, he has been a teacher, and he is going to be discussing today basically the influence of religious ideas on sex and displays of the human body. And he'll answer the question, or ask the question, did pagans have more fun than Christians? He's got extensive teaching experience, having taught for 30 years. And so he's perfect for a New York City atheist because he's used to unruly audiences. So without further ado, let me introduce Bob Costa. He says he wishes that was Jim.
Like Hitchens.
Go get him.
All right. So, hi gang. I'm really out of my element here. At this point, I would just be relaxing, waiting for somebody else to do this, for some brilliant lecture in this series, and they have been brilliant, I must say. So it's a great honor that Ken and everybody have had me here, because every one of these lectures has been really world class, and I hope I can do it justice. There are a lot of problems here. First of all, since I've been retired, I haven't done this in many years. So it was like pulling me out of my cave. And then on top of it, when Ken told me just 2 weeks ago, hey Bob, do you want to talk? And what do you want to talk about? And I said, origins of Christianity. He said, okay, bye. And then I had to think about what I was really going to talk about. And then, of course, I said, origins of Christianity, what you're going to get. And then I said, how do you spice up a lecture? Sex. My grandmother always said a good sauce. You could sell them shoe leather with a good sauce. All right? And the ubiquitous sauce is sex. All right? So we put it together. Now, the other great learning curve for me is I realized last Saturday I needed pictures. And the last time I was doing this many millennia ago, we were still doing slides and reels and horrendous stuff. So thank goodness for the Apple people. They have a wonderful tutorial, one-on-one. I was there all week. I should have paid my rent there. But they brought me to this point wherever it is. All right. Last Saturday, I never used any of this, so this is new. It's going to be a little clunky, probably amateurish. All right. So this is 1 week's work and a lifetime of decadence and deprivation. That's another thing. That was the experience that the 1 week has put in focus. All right, yesterday as I was exercising in the gym, I said, I need a title. Ken said, I better have a title. So it came to me. Another country, religion, sexuality, and the body. All right, that's me. I put my credentials there because they say I need standing. All right, you're supposed to have standing. So that's my MA from Oxford. We'll talk a little bit about that. And can you all hear me?
No, yeah.
If you can't, just raise your hand or something if I'm getting away from the mic. Now, I have two mottos up here which I particularly like. One of my favorite movies is Another Country, and I've taken my title from that. Much of what I'm talking about in this film, the themes, etc., are in that beautiful film by Julian Mitchell. And he kind of takes it from this wonderful first sentence of The Go-Between, the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. And it's a perfect motto for what I'm going to be doing, all right? That we're going to now take out our intellectual passports, and we're going to get on a plane, and we are leaving the present. We are going back 3 millennia. All right? And at some point we may come back here, or you may decide to stay there. All right? We'll see once you've been there. All right, so now, I warn you, this is 4X rated. This is beyond any known sexual experience you will have ever heard of. I know you think you know it all. All right? But this is 4X. This is polymorphously perverse content beyond this point. We are not in the realm of the normal. All right? If that's going to be too difficult, you are always welcome to find the sunlight. All right, let me see if I can do this now. Very sexy, huh? I had that tutorial on Friday. That was very good. Bless his heart. All right, now I thought if you don't confuse them with the first title, you should always confuse them with a second title so they don't know what you're talking about and you can get out early. All right, so Gore Vidal wrote this wonderful article back in The Nation, which was hilarious, called Monotheism and Its Discontents, which I liked, so I used it. I say a personal view because this is, of course, mine, so I selected these things. He's, of course, playing off Freud's famous book, Civilization and Its Discontents, which in German, das Unbehagen in der Kultur. Now, that's a very interesting title for me, because what most of this lecture is going to be about is the uneasy human relationship between our animal nature as primates and this other thing that we've stuck onto it, which no other animal has, culture. And the whole of human history has been this, as Freud says, das Unbehagen, the uneasiness, the tension between our Darwinian inheritance as primates and this other extra thing we've added on with language. And it's never been behagen. It's never been easy. All right? Next. Sexy. All right. Cool. All right, I better have an overview so we see where the trajectory, the telos, as Aristotle would say. I'm going to be working within the intellectual system called cultural materialism, which is a development of historical materialism. Basically what that means is I'm working in a Darwinian materialist concept that thinks that we really should start with our animal material existence rather than the ideas, and that our ideas are formed from our material existence. It's very Darwinian, very Marxist, very materialist. All right? We're going to go back to the origins of monotheism in Egypt and Israel. We're going to talk about monotheism's effects on society and personality and formation, what it's done to us. We're going to talk about polytheism and paganism and its social consequences and the invention of the nude, democracy, and gymnasium. All right? And what a radical different world that is from monotheism. Then we're going to do a little bit on Christianity's view of the body and how we've tried to recover from it. And I want to make you realize that I'm going to be reading the body as text and ideology. I know you all think these things are absolutely self-evident. That you wake up in the morning, you look at yourself in the bathroom, and you say, that's me. Well, by the end of this lecture, you may have second thoughts. That you don't realize how much that had to be constructed. And that everything you're doing from right now, sitting there, grooming yourself the way you've looked, is an ideological construction. All right? For a particular society, a particular way you want to be gazed at and gazed. Nothing is simple. All right, some basic things. Cultural materialism, you want to go on. Marvin Harris coined the word. Everybody should read his Cowards, Pigs, Wars, and Witches, and Cannibals and Kings. Jared Diamond is in the same tradition, Guns, Germs, and Steels, another great book. Marx, of course, we're going to talk a little bit later. Terry Eagleton and Jonathan Culler's books are very good on the literary background. Terry Eagleton, I used to know him. He's now lost his mind, but he used to be very good. If you go to YouTube, he's made this insane lecture at Yale, kind of attacking Dawkins, and I don't know what's happened to him. And De Saint-Croix is my teacher, and I'm going to talk about him, his great magnum opus, The Class Struggle in the Ancient Greek World, and I'll read you some choice passages. This I'll just say briefly, was a fierce atheist. He was the one I first confronted as the greatest atheist I'd ever met. And I was still kind of toying with Christianity as bells and smells, and cute altar boys and pretty pictures. But he was the one who made me, and who used to give annual lectures against the Christians in Oxford, which were great fun. We might talk about that. All right, contested binaries. Very important. Memes versus race and DNA. When I speak of the Greeks or the Jews or the Israelites, I am not referring to a physical people so much as the set of memes. Do you all know that word memes from Dawkins and Dennett? It comes from the word memory. And Dawkins, I think it was in The Selfish Gene originally, back in '72 or something, came up with this quite brilliant idea that just as there are genetic genes that pass on knowledge to us physically, that there are cultural genes, and he called them memes. Something like the nude or pants are a meme. The idea that you're not wearing a toga today, that you got up and put on pants, is a meme. You had to be culturally taught to do that. Okay? And almost everything we do is filtered through memes. Which came to be assembled and function under the names Hellenism and Judaism. I am not promoting or denigrating any people as superior or inferior to other real people, but critiquing the memes of functioning sets. Is that clear? So I'm not saying the Greeks are good guys, the Jews are bad guys, or vice versa, or anything like that. Okay? Now, another binary, sex and sexuality versus gender. I know you all thought you were born little boys and girls. You weren't. All right? You were born, now this is Judith Butler's gender trouble. You were probably born with an anatomical sex. Although extreme constructionists even fight about that. I'm not that camp. I'm a very moderate constructionist. I believe there is anatomical sex that you were born with, when you look at yourself in the morning. And however, what is radical is that the constructionists like Judith Butler, Foucault, have strongly argued that over that outlay there is gender, and gender is a construct. It's an ideological construct. All of us have learned to be boy or girl, and none of us performs that perfectly. All of us every day are acting out gender roles. This is quite a revolution, which has really only happened in the last 30 years since Foucault invented the history of sexuality. Although there might have been forerunners, but really this has become a whole thing the last 30 years. Okay, that'll come up as we go along. Monotheism was coined by a Cambridge Platonist named Henry Moore. The Cambridge Platonists, we're not going to talk about now, but they're an interesting group of people. Milton, incidentally, was there with him. And that's where the word monotheism means one God. You believe in one God. We're going a little faster now. A little background here, just to make sure we're all on the same page, some words. A nice word to use is henotheism. How many of you know henotheism? That's much rarer. It was coined by Max Müller up there, who was German, professor at Oxford. Very important in the whole development of the scholarship on religions in the 19th century. He was a very eminent scholar. And he coined the word. It means the belief in one God, but not to the exclusion of other gods. And in fact, most monotheism is actually quite rare in history. In fact, probably was invented in America in the 1950s. But in fact, when you really look at Judaism, etc., they really are forms of henotheism, even Christianity. All right, they don't deny there are demons, and even Satan. Some Christians believe Satan is the other form of God. Monolatry is another thing like that. Incidentally, any of you are interested in music, Max Müller's father, Wilhelm, was a German poet friendly with Franz Schubert, and it was his poetry that Franz Schubert set to music in Die Winterreise and Die Schöne Müllerin, those two famous song cycles. Monolatry is kind of similar to henotheism and Catholicism. I'm not going to worry about it right now. All right, you need that more for Hinduism. All right, so far as we can tell, monotheism, or something like it, possibly henotheism, was invented by this extraordinarily interesting person, Akhenaten, and his wife Nefertiti. How many have heard of Akhenaten and Nefertiti? All right, some. Incidentally, her name, Nefer, whenever you see names in Egyptian with Nefer, it means beautiful. And beautiful, her name is very beautiful. It means the one who walks in beauty, or the one who comes in beauty. All right? Akhenaten's name means the one who's in touch with the Aten, sort of. Now, something happened. This is way beyond what we're going to talk about today. For some reason, at the height of the Egyptian Empire, his father was probably the greatest of all the pharaohs, Amenhotep III. The Egyptian Empire spreads from the Euphrates down into Africa, Libya, this vast empire. For some reason, when he becomes pharaoh, he decides to close all the temples to the gods in the 5th year of his reign. He closed all the priesthoods, etc., and starts a new religion, or takes one part, the sun god, and decides he's the guy, a henotheism. That's him worshiping. And he's a religious genius. He invents a symbol, the Aten disk. There he is worshiping the Aten. He is also the world's first pacifist. We know this because, oh, that's his beautiful wife Nefertiti. It's famous. Everybody's seen this, right? The original is in Berlin. They want it back now, the Egyptians. I don't think they should get it. They're not ready for it. But anyway, it's better in Berlin. They conserve it very well. And this stunning. This was found in 1913. This beautiful, beautiful statue. Now notice he's quite misshapen. Medical experts fight about what disease he had. I remember I used to hear. I'm not a doctor, but I think one thing they used to say was Hodgkin's. But then the problem is he's not supposed to be able to have children. That's supposed to make you sterile. But then we know he had at least 6 children, including possibly Tutankhamun and daughters, etc. But he had these very strange hips. There's been a lot of speculation whether he came to think of himself as a woman, and we're not going to go there. All right, so there he is. Now, what's interesting about his pacifism, he refused to let the Egyptian armies fight. And this caused an enormous crisis for the empire. Oh, okay. Now, Freud comes along, and in Moses and Monotheism, he gets the brilliant idea that it was the Hebrews are the remnant of Akhenaten's Aten religion. Because when he died after 17 or 18 years of reign, the priests finally got back control. There was chaos. The priests got control back and eventually put the 9-year-old boy Tutankhamun on the throne, who died at 18 or 19. And they then reopened the temples and erased his name all over Egypt. All right? And he was given what the Romans called a damnatio memoriae, a damnation of his memory. In fact, we knew nothing about him until 1891, as you're going to see. I thought I did miss a slide. I have a slide. I'm missing a slide. Oh, the Amarna letters. That's the correspondence that he had with all the vassals in the Middle East, etc., which tells us that he was a pacifist. And they were desperate. They were sending him notes. Please send the Egyptian army to defend us. And his letters back, no, the Aten disk is the one who loves us. He's we are brothers. All right, very, he was like Gandhi, a very extraordinary person. Anyway, he was completely forgotten until the archaeologists recovered this all. All right, we're moving ahead. Freud came up with the brilliant idea, I just want to go back here, to Habiru. The first time we see this word in Egyptian, Habiru, is in the letters of Akhenaten. And they seem to be a people living in Egypt, and the Egyptologists way back when they were first discovered said, Habiru, that's Hebrews. All right? And this fight is still going on within the Egyptologist community, whether it is the Hebrews or not, and whoever they are. But that's, Freud then said that the Aten disk was the origin of the thing. Now, we get to the adoration of the golden calf. These are all myths. You know, I don't think any of this is really historical. This is by Poussin, this great painting in the National Gallery, London. Now, we all know the story when Moses was up on the mountain. As the Bible says, the Jews backslid. They went into backsliding, which sounded like fun to me. And they were worshiping the golden calf, who was the goddess Hathor, the goddess of sexuality, love, fertility. Moses comes down, bashes and he's got laws now for the first time. And he said, no, you're not supposed to do this, bad boys and girls. And that night, quite appalling, he and his boys go through the crowd and kill 3,000 of the Israelites because they were having a party. Now, this is like you would go into New York, into the discotheques, and in the morning as everybody was coming out, you started to kill them because they had a good time the night before. All right? It's loony. But this is what monotheism begins to do. It begins to say there's a set of laws, and you better control the body and stop worshiping all those fertility sex gods. It also, we now know in the early, in fact, it's more and more likely that Judaism was polytheistic until the exile. Really, what we think of as Judaism is what we call a post-exilic creation. That David and Solomon, etc., if they existed at all, were probably still polytheistic. And we know that Yahweh, the war god that we call Jehovah, had a wife, Asherot. All right, that's now been recovered. Now, yes. Now, that's Van Dyck's beautiful picture of the brass serpents. Two things I'm just going to quickly go over that's causing a huge stir in Old Testament studies. These two people in particular, Keith Whitelam in The Invention of Ancient Israel and Thomas Thompson, The Mythic Past, Biblical Archaeology and the Myth of Israel, have basically shown that virtually all of the Old Testament stories are essentially fiction. All right? This is driving the Old Testament archaeologists up 10 walls. All right? Because they really can't answer it. What I find is when I go to meetings, they just haven't even read it. They just, they don't believe anything. And so, if you want, you can explore that. Now, some important things. With the invention of monotheism, we get the creation of the heretic and the other. As soon as you say, I got the right God, everything you are worshiping is the wrong God. And therefore, I have the right to do nasty things to you. Like kill you, get rid of you, call you a heretic, call you an infidel, call you the Taliban, call you whatever. We start naming people as the other. Okay? Now, this is important. In polytheism, the worship of many gods is not doctrinal, but about the performance of cult for the gods. No one would have asked you in ancient Greece what you thought about Zeus, or whether you loved Zeus. The only important thing was that the state cults for the gods were performed so that the gods got their sacrifices and stayed out of your way and did what you wanted. But nobody wrote theology books about the gods. This becomes an obsession of Christianity, as we're going to see. It's very hard for moderns to understand this because we're constantly hit by people. Do you believe in Jesus? Do you believe in Jesus? Do you believe in Jehovah? Do you believe in this? Nobody talked about belief. It was cult. All right? There is no discussion of faith or correct belief in polytheism. Okay? Or even atheism meant you had refused to perform state cults to the gods. Nobody asked you whether they believed in them or not. Is that clear? If there's any burning question, you could, am I being okay? Sodom and Gomorrah. This is definitely monotheism. If there was one story I would tear out of the Bible, it's that. It has probably resulted in the deaths of at least hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people over the last 2+ millennia. If you want to read, Lewis Crompton's great book, Homosexuality and Civilization, is an astonishing record of civilization. And in the last chapter, after he writes this amazingly erudite 900-page book, which I just finished last year, and I learned more about sex than I ever thought I knew. But in the end, in the final chapter, he has a chapter on China, Japan, the Arabs, and he says in the end, he said, you know, I don't really want to be nasty about the Judeo-Christian stuff, but there is no other civilization or culture that has so demonized sex in the body like the Judeo-Christian religion, especially the Christian part. All right? It's a unique hatred of sex in the body, which you do not really find anywhere else. And it's certainly not in this form. Michael Rock's incredible book, Forbidden Friendships, I'll talk about when we get to the Renaissance, Homosexuality and Male Culture. Mark Jordan, The Invention of Sodomy in Christian Theology. You know, we always hear every day in the paper, sodomy this, sodomy that, someone's accused of sodomy, someone's arrested for sodomy. Sodomy was an invention of Christianity. No one before Christianity was penalized. There was no, first of all, the word didn't exist. It had to come from the Jewish story in the Old Testament. The Greeks and Romans, they knew about sex, plenty. But nobody was ever arrested for sexual acts except rape. That was a crime of violence. All right? Now, you were not free to go around doing anything you wanted. There were parameters. But no one was put on trial, etc., for crimes of sex. Sexuality was decriminalized. All right? Essentially.